or do something on a job, it's because I think it's not unprofessional. If they feel otherwise, that's their opinion. But at the job, we started talking about something. I was talking to a coworker. We were sitting alone by ourselves. It wasn't with other people. It wasn't in an unprofessional way. But we were talking about firefighters. At the time, there was a news report that was really fast in New York, but I'm going to link a screenshot for the thumbnail of a news report that some people claimed that firefighters were stealing from them after a fire. And that was a big topic. So I mentioned it to my coworker. And my point is this. If we have a problem or people are reporting something, it should be on the news. Because the news is just that. To me, the news is to let people know something is happening. So I think news reports have recently been censored. So things are going on in the world that we don't know about, that once you hear it on the news, the only way to talk about it or the only way to know about it is to talk about it. So this whole thing to me has a lot to do with censorship, a lot to do with you might have heard something. What did you hear? So they want to say it's gossip. No, that isn't gossip. That's news. Prior to this, the news not telling us all the news, we had newspapers. So if something happened, it was in a newspaper, you could show someone, okay, here's the news. Without having a physical newspaper, it's hard to refer back to stories. It's hard to find stories online. Something could have been reported. Maybe you saw it years ago, and it's hard to then find that. I had to search for a lot of these news reports, and I'm going to use it as a thumbnail. So if you're interested, you can see where I found it. But it's hard now without a newspaper. And I know that it's expensive to print newspapers and it's hard, but even just having some sort of a newspaper where people can get the news, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So I think there is a need for the newspapers. Now in New York, I think the newspapers are over $3, $3 and up. That to me is ridiculous. It's expensive, but I understand in a way that it's more expensive to print newspapers than it was before. But I still think there's a need for newspapers. So what I want to do is I'm also going to link a news report that I just watched of a 14-year-old boy involved in murder, prostitution, and drugs. The reason that's so important is because I've been telling you guys so many times, I feel like almost in every video I talk about prostitution, and especially how they're sucking children into prostitution. And I want this to be something that is on the news. We got to get to a point where the national news and these stories that we're all following, like we're following these major stories that are happening throughout this country. And it's not being reported a lot on the national news because I think they don't want the American public to know, because it will affect how we vote. I'm a Democrat. I'm going to always vote for a Democrat, but I will vote for a candidate who talks about these issues. I think a candidate who talks about if there's child abuse and how we stop it. We shouldn't have any child prostitution in the United States. It should never occur here. It should never be. And to think that it is happening in the United States and it's not something that's being discussed, and any political candidate who talks about it should be someone who we vote for, because that's the last thing we need. We're talking about abortion, but who cares once the child is out of the womb? Out of the womb. Who cares about the kid then? That's my point. If we're going to talk about bringing children into the world, we need to talk about what happens once the children are in the world. So that's a major issue with me. But also the issue is if there's a problem within any form of firefighters, police department, politics, it has to be spoken about. So the other point I want to make about that, because in the previous video that I did that I deleted because of the background, I mentioned, that they said that I am for funding the police, meaning I don't support defunding the police. Not only do I not support defunding the police, I support dividing any sort of 911 calls into different categories. If it's a crime, law and order, that's the police, because we, like you say, you police something. If it's a medical emergency, you have EMS. Now, EMS to me should not be combined with fire department and all this other stuff. That should be separate. It used to be separate. Now in New York, it's combined. It shouldn't be. There should have always been kept separate departments. Then if you have a mental medical emergency, because to me, mental health is a health issue, then you should have something that deals with mental health so that those people go out, and if they need the police, they would be able to call the police, meaning the call shouldn't automatically go to the police. A mental health expert should figure out what the emergency is, because anyone who calls 911 is having an emergency, and then contact the police so that there won't be an automatic